Our single-page application is cool, but at the same time, it's a bit pointless. Let's add some user interaction logic here. JavaScript is a language used to turn static HTML pages into dynamic pages with diverse application cases and interactive UI components, so with user interface actually. React.js is a very powerful JavaScript framework for building rich interactive single-page applications. In the previous lesson of this preparation module, we considered how our server application could be composed of packages using the npm package manager and package file, package.json. Similar logic works also with the client side with browser JavaScript code. Let's go over it again, step by step. Let's create the initial structure. First of all, we have to create some new files and directories. In our case, let's start with files. First of all, we need a file called webpack.config.js. Let's create it in the root directory of our project, in my case in Web3 Waves. Also, we need new files, .babelrc, here is it, and also we need two directories. The first one is src, the source code of our project. We will have here the main code for our React application. Inside the src directory, we create another one called components, and in the components directory, we have a file called app.js. In the src directory, we create a file called main.js. Great. Looks like we are done with the structure. Let me explain what all these files and directories do in our project. First of all, let's start with webpack.config.js. It's a config file for Webpack, which is very common now. Webpack is a bundler. It's a tool which helps you to bundle your JavaScript, to compile it from the newest versions, from ECMA 2015, for example, to older versions to make it backward compatible. Webpack actually does not compile it, but it supports Babel, which actually compiles it from the newest versions to the older versions. So in our case, we have very simple Webpack config. We have an entry file in src main.js is our entry file. We expect some output file build.js when Babel build the file and Webpack actually get the bundle of it, we will get this file called build.js. Here we use Babel. What is Babel? Actually, we have here a .babelrc file, which is a configuration file for Babel. To be honest, Babel is a pretty simple tool which converts, as I already said, the newest JavaScript code, ECMA script 2015 plus, to older versions, to make it possible to work in older versions of browsers. So to make it backward compatible, as I already said. Here we have very simple configuration with, actually here is a preset for React. So it's a predefined settings for React. So we use those settings. Now let's move to actual business logic, to actual code of our application. In this case, let's move to the file called app.js. In the app.js, we import some dependencies, some React dependencies, and we define one component called app. We extend React component, and here we have very simple function, render function, which is a default function to render something on the page. Here we have one div tag with class name container. Inside that div tag, we have one input with type submit, which is actually a button. And here we have one event handler. On click, we will alert some very simple message here, alert button on click. Also, we have three more useful lines here. We try to find an element on the page with ID app. So this variable will contain the link to an element with ID app in our HTML file, in the index HTML file. So we try to find that element with this ID. And if we find it, if everything is okay, if variable is not undefined, then we render our app component. The file is pretty simple. Also, we have here a main.js file which just imports that component, our app component, and honestly, that's it. To run all this, you may say, what is React? How we can get this React? We, of course, have to update our package.json file. I updated it, and now, as you can see, I have much more dependencies than before. In the first lesson, we had only one dependency of Express. Now we have 7 dependencies, and it includes like React, React DOM, which we import in app component. Also, we still have Express, we have Babel. We also have another section called dev dependencies. These dev dependencies we use only during our development process. So I actually only updated the package.json file. I didn't install all these dependencies, so I have to run a command called npm install. Let's do that and let's see the result. Everything should work fine. Great, that's it. 0 vulnerabilities, everything is installed. Great, but we are not done yet. We installed all dependencies, we created a component, we created the entry file main.js, but we didn't update our HTML file, our index HTML file, and we didn't do anything with our server-side code. So let's open our index.html. First of all, as you may remember, our app component requires an element with ID app. So we have to create that component. Here is it. Here is div tag with ID app. And also we have to include in our HTML file our bundled JavaScript file. So in our case, as you may remember in webpack.config.js, we said that the name of our output file is build.js. So in HTML, we have to include this build.js. We use tag script, looks very simple. Great, looks like we are done with the client side. What about the server side? Actually, as you may remember, our server side only serves one path, our root path, and just sends index.html file when somebody tries to request our website with the root path. But now we have to serve not only our index.html file, but also we have to serve our build.js file, which we will get when we build this application. So we define very, very simple line here. We define that we have a source for static files. Here is it, express static dname dist. And our app will use that path to serve static files. Sounds pretty simple. Well, looks like everything is ready to build our bundled file, to build our build.js file. So let's run npm run build. Great, as you can see, now we have a directory called dist, and in the dist directory we have build.js. Great, now we should be able to run our server and it should work. So let's try to do npm run start. Great, it still says that it is listening port number 5000, so I'll just refresh our page. Great, now we have a button with alert text, and if I click this button, I get a message. This lesson was very simple and very basic introduction of React and some tools we will use in the next lessons. Actually, I just wanted to show you that we will use React, we will build some components there, and we will use tools like Webpack, Babel, and NPM. I'm not going to talk much about all of these tools. To be honest, we are almost done with these tools. But I really want you to read or watch something more about these tools. They can be very useful if you are pretty new to web development. If you are already familiar with it, then you can, of course, skip and you can say that you know all of this. Anyway, to wrap up, we built a component called app. We defined here one simple div with one button. We updated our index.html file and added here one tag with ID app and included here one script file. We created new files with one with webpack config, another with Babel RC config, and also we updated our server side. We added the source for our static files, and we also updated our package.json file to add more dependencies. Our first React.js plus Node.js web application is ready. In this lesson, we have used prepared React components and have just showed the basics of the technology. I highly recommend learning more about React because it is awesome. Links to useful materials are below in the description of the video. In the next lesson, we'll talk about another absolutely vital tool, Git. I'll wait for you there.